Hey guys, tonight we're gently marching into the surprisingly intricate world of the ingenious Vietnamese supply routes, the unsung path to national independence. Picture this, you're not in a thundering tank or a screaming jet, oh no. You're tracing a barely visible line on a damp, thrice-folded map. A map that smells faintly of monsoon rain and maybe a hint of yesterday's noodle soup. The most dramatic sound for miles might be the persistent buzz of a particularly ambitious mosquito, or perhaps the gentle, rhythmic creak of a bamboo pole laden with well. We'll get to the surprisingly mundane yet vital contents later. You're surrounded by a green so deep and vast it feels like the world has forgotten any other color exists. This isn't the stuff of blockbuster war epics, is it? Frankly, you probably wouldn't survive the boredom of meticulously counting grains of rice or weaving another camouflage thatch roof for a hidden way station day in, day out for years. It's the quiet, almost invisible backbone of a nation's struggle. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support, much like a well-placed stone on a muddy trail, really does help pave the way. And while you're at it, why not post your current location and local time in the comments below? It's always fascinating to see where in the world these sleepy stories are drifting off to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's surprisingly calm campaign together. You're stepping back, way back, before the hum of trucks or even the determined squeak of heavily laden bicycles. Imagine a time when the land itself dictated the flow of life and movement, long before strategists in distant capitals pored over satellite images. We're talking about ancient pathways, foot-worn trails that whispered through dense jungles and snaked over formidable mountain ranges. In what would eventually become Vietnam, these weren't highways, not by any stretch of your modern imagination. Think less Roman road, straight and proud, and more deer path, shy and winding. You can almost feel the cool, damp earth beneath your bare feet, the way the leaves form a dense, rustling canopy overhead, filtering the sunlight into 1,000 shifting patterns. These early routes, some possibly thousands of years old, were etched into the landscape by the daily necessities of life. Perhaps you're a trader, your shoulders bearing a pole with woven baskets filled with salt from the coast, heading towards an inland village to barter for forest products, maybe rare medicinal herbs or fragrant spices. Or you could be a monk, seeking the quiet solitude of a remote mountain pagoda, your saffron robes a bright splash of color against the endless green, your footsteps as soft as the falling leaves. Villagers use these paths to visit relatives in the next valley, to reach fertile fishing spots along winding rivers, or to attend local festivals. Their laughter and chatter absorbed by the ancient trees. The GPS of the time, probably something along the lines of follow the stream, until you see the strangely leaning banyan tree. Then listen for the sound of Annie Mai's prize-winning rooster. Definitely more organic than a satellite signal, and arguably more reliable in a downpour. The sheer human effort to even create these initial paths, often through incredibly challenging terrain, is a quiet testament to resilience. Mainstream historical understanding often focuses on the grander movements of armies, or the rise and fall of dynasties. But the social fabric of these early Southeast Asian communities was woven together by these humble capillaries of connection. They allowed for the slow, steady exchange of goods, ideas, and even genetic diversity between isolated settlements. Without these Each village might as well have been its own tiny, introspective planet. There's a certain ingrained knowledge that comes from living so intimately with such a landscape. You learn to read the signs which plants are edible, which are best avoided, how the behavior of animals can predict a coming storm, or which type of bamboo is best for building a quick shelter. Quirky superstitions often attach themselves to these trails. Perhaps a certain gnarled old tree at a crossroads was believed to house a mischievous forest spirit, requiring a small offering of fruit or a whispered plea for safe passage, to avoid having your water gourd mysteriously spring a leak. Or maybe certain rock formations were seen as sleeping dragons, and you tread extra carefully, lest you disturb their slumber and invite bad luck, or worse, a landslide. It sounds whimsical to us now, but these beliefs often encoded practical wisdom about the land, a kind of ecological and geographical memory passed down through generations. You can almost picture it, a young person learning the routes from an elder, not by map, but by a landmark, by the feel of the trail underfoot, by the subtle changes in vegetation that signal a change in altitude or proximity to water. This wasn't about conquering nature, but about moving with it, understanding its rhythms and its secrets. You wouldn't just barge through the undergrowth. You find the path of least resistance, the way the water flows, the natural contours of the land. Historians still argue whether the precise alignments of some of these most ancient footpaths, seemingly random to an outsider's eye, actually represented sophisticated, albeit unwritten, understandings of microclimates and seasonal resource availability. Were they just convenient, or were they subtly optimized over centuries of trial and error? Imagine the patience involved. These weren't routes designed for speed. A journey of a few dozen miles might take days, punctuated by nights spent in simple lintos or huddled around small, carefully concealed fires. The rush hour on these trails might consist of encountering a family of wild boar, politely giving them the right of way, and forget about Wi-Fi. Your main concern would be keeping your fire-starting kit dry. It's a different kind of quiet, a different kind of effort than we're used to. It's the slow, steady pulse of life lived in close quarters with a powerful, often unforgiving, natural world. And it's this profound, almost cellular knowledge of the land, these ancient, almost invisible lines of travel, that would, centuries later, become the quiet, unassuming foundation for one of the most astonishing logistical feats in modern history. The resourcefulness wasn't invented overnight. It was cultivated, like a rare jungle orchid, in the very soil of these ancient paths. You're no longer just a solitary traveler on an ancient path. Now, imagine you are part of a quiet, almost imperceptible stirring within countless villages. The air, still thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, now carries hushed conversations, glances exchanged over steaming bowls of rice, and the subtle planning that begins not with grand pronouncements, but with a shared understanding. It's here, in these scattered hamlets and isolated farming communities, nestled in valleys or perched on hillsides, that the real genius of the burgeoning supply network starts to take root, not through official decrees shouted from on high, but through the collective will and local knowledge of ordinary people. You might be an elder in one such village, your face a roadmap of seasons past, your hands gnarled, but still nimble as you weave a fishing net or repair a warm basket. You know every stream, every hidden grove, every tricky mountain pass within a day's walk, and then some. You know which families can be trusted implicitly, Who has a spare room that can discreetly shelter a traveler? Who is adept at mending clothes or tools with scarce resources? This knowledge, accumulated over a lifetime, is now more valuable than gold. It's not written down in any official manual. It's held in the collective memory of the community, a living, breathing database of local geography and human connection. Think of it as a highly advanced, organic social network, predating anything Silicon Valley could dream of, powered by shared purpose rather than algorithms. You wouldn't need to friend request anyone. The bonds are already there, forged by shared history and circumstance. The challenge, you see, is to move people and supplies without drawing unwanted attention. Large, obvious movements are out of the question. So, everything becomes smaller, more discreet. A few extra bundles of rice carried by someone ostensibly going to market in the next village. A group of young men heading off on a hunting trip that takes them along a prearranged, less traveled route. A woman visiting a sick relative in a neighboring hamlet, carrying a basket that might contain medicine, messages, or perhaps even carefully disassembled parts of a weapon. It's about blending into the normal rhythms of rural life, making the extraordinary appear entirely ordinary. You might spend your days tending your small paddy field, your silhouette stooped against the horizon, looking for all the world like any other farmer. But at night, you might be guiding a small group through a treacherous stretch of jungle, your knowledge of the terrain ensuring their safe passage. Mainstream historical accounts often detail the major military campaigns and the leaders who directed them. But the truly astonishing logistical feat here was its decentralized nature, relying heavily on the initiative and resourcefulness of countless individuals. At the grassroots level, the social impact was profound, transforming isolated communities into vital nodes in a larger, clandestine network. This fostered a deep sense of shared purpose and mutual reliance, even among villages that might have had little contact before. Your neighbor wasn't just your neighbor anymore. They were a potential link and a crucial chain. One quirky tidbit from such times is the ingenious use of coded language and signals, often embedded in everyday conversation or seemingly innocuous actions. A particular way of hanging out washing, the placement of a certain flower pot, a song sung at a specific time, these could all convey messages. Imagine you hear a neighbor singing a seemingly innocent folk song, but a slight change in a familiar lyric alerts you that a certain path is clear, or that a patrol is nearby. It's like a secret handshake, but woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Perhaps there was a local superstition about, say, never whistling after dark near the old banyan tree, unless you wanted to invite bad luck, a superstition conveniently reinforced. Because that particular banyan tree was a known drop-off point. Historians still argue about the true extent and complexity of these local signaling systems, how standardized they were, or how much was purely ad hoc innovation. Was there a regional dialect of secret signals? Or was it more like a family-specific set of inside jokes? You become incredibly adept at observation. You notice the slightest changes in your surroundings, a broken twig on a path that shouldn't be broken, an unfamiliar bird call, the absence of a usual sound. Your senses are heightened not by fear, but by a calm, focused awareness. The jungle, which to an outsider might seem like a chaotic green tangle, becomes a readable text. You learn the art of silence, of moving without leaving a trace, of communicating with a glance or a subtle gesture. You and your fellow villagers become the unseen, unheard enablers of a much larger movement. Your small, seemingly insignificant contributions, when multiplied by thousands, create something vast and incredibly resilient. Think of the trust involved. You're relying on people you may have never met and villages far down the line to do their part, just as they are relying on you. A single act of carelessness or betrayal could compromise not just individuals, but entire sections of the network. This shared vulnerability forged incredibly strong bonds. The payment for your efforts wasn't usually monetary. It was the survival of your community, the hope for a different future. You might share your meager food supplies with a passing group, knowing that someone else, further along the trail, would do the same for your son or daughter if they were the ones on the move. It's a system built on reciprocity and a deep, quiet patriotism that didn't need grand speeches or waving flags. It was expressed in the careful packing of a rice ball, the mending of a worn sandal, the whispered directions given under the cover of darkness. The network wasn't just lines on a map. It was a web of human relationships, stretched taut but surprisingly strong, across a landscape that was both a challenge and a sanctuary. Now, imagine the quiet village paths and hidden jungle trails beginning to echo with a new, metallic sound. Not the roar of engines, not yet, but the persistent, rhythmic, and sometimes protesting squeak of the humble bicycle. You see them leaning against huts, perhaps initially used for quicker trips to market or visiting relatives just a bit further away than comfortable walking distance. They might be sturdy, old-fashioned models, think heavy steel frames, simple brakes. Maybe a little bell that offers a cheerful ding totally at odds with its future workload. At first glance, they're just bikes. Nothing remarkable. You've probably got something for fancier gathering dust in your garage right now. But soon, necessity, that mother of all invention and extreme modifications, begins to work its quiet magic on these unassuming machines. You watch, perhaps initially puzzled, as someone starts reinforcing a bicycle frame. Not with fancy welding equipment from a modern workshop, oh no. Think bamboo splints lashed tightly with rattan strips. Extra pieces of salvaged metal bolted or wired into place. The goal isn't aesthetics. It's pure, unadulterated load-bearing capacity. Handlebars might be extended or reinforced, sometimes with sturdy branches, to provide better leverage not for steering, but for pushing and balancing. The seat, often dispensed with entirely. This machine isn't for riding anymore. It's evolving into a two-wheel beast of burden. A pedal-powered pack mule. You could say the manufacturer's warranty was probably voided several times over with each ingenious, desperate addition. And the loads. This is where things get truly, almost comically, ambitious. Forget carrying a picnic basket or a bag of groceries. You see bicycles laden with sacks of rice stacked precariously high. Bundles of ammunition carefully wrapped in waterproof sheeting. Disassembled pieces of heavier equipment, medical supplies, even building materials. We're talking hundreds of pounds, sometimes significantly more. Balanced on a machine originally designed to carry a single person. Mainstream historical sources confirm that these modified bicycles, often French models like Peugeots left over from the colonial era, could be reinforced to carry loads exceeding 400 pounds, around 180 kilograms. Sometimes even claimed up to 600 pounds, over 270 kilograms on relatively flat stretches. That's like strapping 3 or 4 average adults onto a single bike frame. Your modern delivery driver complaining about a few heavy boxes suddenly seems rather quaint, don't they? You might be one of the people tasked with moving these mechanical marvels. It's not about pedaling gracefully down a paved road. You're pushing, often with a sturdy pole, the famed you dive braced against the extended handlebars or frame for leverage, while another person might be pulling from the front, and perhaps others guiding from the sides, especially on treacherous slopes or through thick mud. It's slow, grinding work. You feel the strain in your shoulders, your legs burning with the effort. The only soundtrack is the rhythmic squeak and groan of the overburdened metal, the squelch of mud underfoot, your own steady breathing, and the rustle of the jungle around you. Forget your trendy high-intensity interval training. This is the original extreme endurance workout, fueled by willpower and maybe a small ball of sticky rice. There's a quirky art to it, a specific technique developed through trial and error. Teams learn to balance the immense loads perfectly, distributing weight with surprising precision. They develop ways to navigate incredibly narrow paths, sometimes having to partially disassemble the load to squeeze through tight spots, only to reassemble it on the other side. A particular fringe belief, or perhaps just a practical superstition, might have arisen. Maybe you never leaned the fully loaded bike against that kind of tree, the one with the smooth bark, because it was slippery luck and the bike would surely tip over. Or perhaps certain rhythmic chants or quiet songs help coordinate the pushing and pulling efforts of the team, turning the grueling task into a shared, almost meditative struggle. If those bikes could talk, they'd probably have a few choice words about their dramatically altered career path. Historians still argue about the precise origins of some of the most effective modification techniques. Was there a single ingenious individual who first figured out the optimal bamboo bracing method? Or did similar solutions evolve independently in different regions based on available materials and local ingenuity and the absolute maximum weight carried? While astonishing figures are often cited, verifying the absolute upper limits achieved on treacherous jungle paths remains a subject of gentle academic debate. Did someone really manage to move the disassembled anti-aircraft gun piece on just to reinforce bicycles? The records are often anecdotal, passed down through stories rather than meticulously logged manifests. You see these steel horses, as they were sometimes nicknamed, moving in long, silent lines, often under the cover of darkness or dense canopy, becoming almost invisible against the backdrop of the jungle. They represent a monumental feat of human power, combined with simple mechanical advantage. It's strangely beautiful in its own rugged, functional way, the ultimate expression of making do, of turning an everyday object into a critical tool of resilience and resistance. These weren't just bicycles anymore. They were vital arteries, carrying the lifeblood of a struggle, one creaking, heavily laden revolution at a time, down paths where no truck could ever hope to go. The gentle ding of the bell might be long gone, replaced by the determined groan of stressed metal. But the forward momentum was undeniable. You're deep within the embrace of the jungle now, the kind of place where sunlight struggles to pierce the dense, multi-layered canopy, leaving the forest floor in a perpetual twilight. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, decaying leaves, and 1,000 unseen blossoms. It's an environment that, to an outsider, might feel oppressive, disorienting, almost malevolent. But for the supply routes, this overwhelming greenness became an invaluable, almost sentient ally. You're learning to see the jungle not as an obstacle, but as a cloak, A vast, rustling, living camouflage net provided by nature itself. Imagine you're part of a team tasked with maintaining a section of the trail. Your primary concern isn't just keeping the path clear of fallen logs or encroaching vines, though that's part of it. Your real artistry lies in ensuring the trail remains utterly invisible from above, and as inconspicuous as possible even to someone stumbling nearby. This isn't about blazing a wide, clear highway. It's about threading a needle through an existing tapestry. You learn to weave fallen branches and freshly cut foliage back into the overhead canopy, creating a natural-looking screen that blends seamlessly with the surroundings. If you have to widen a section, you do it with an eye towards how the disturbed vegetation will look from even a short distance away. The goal is for any aerial reconnaissance, or even a keen-eye patrol on the ground, to see nothing but an unbroken expanse of indifferent jungle. Your work is the art of disappearing in plain sight. You're not just a trail worker, you're a landscape artist, specializing in subtle deception. The sheer density of the vegetation in many parts of Southeast Asia provided an unparalleled advantage for concealment. Mainstream historical sources widely acknowledge that the triple canopy rainforest, with its towering emergent trees, a dense middle layer, and thick undergrowth, made aerial detection of troop movements and supply lines incredibly difficult, especially before the widespread use of defoliants or more advanced sensor technology. It was, in essence, a pre-existing, self-repairing stealth system. You could move entire columns of porters or convoys of laden bicycles under its protection, and from a few hundred feet up, they would be swallowed by the green. You might even say the jungle had excellent operational security, or OPSEC, long before the term became fashionable in military circles. You observe the natural camouflage of the forest creatures the way a python blends with the dappled light and shadow, or how a stick insect can vanish against a branch. You try to emulate that. If a section of the trail passes through an area with a particular type of fern, you ensure the ferns are used in your camouflaging efforts. If the ground is covered in a specific color of leaf litter, you're careful not to introduce anything that would contrast sharply. It's a meticulous, almost reverent attention to detail. One quirky, though perhaps apocryphal, tidbit suggests that some trail sections even had movable bushes, carefully prepared sections of shrubbery on woven mats that could be quickly pulled into place to cover a path when an alert was sounded, then just as quickly pulled away. Imagine the surprise of an enemy patrol, thinking they found a clear path, only for it to vanish behind a suddenly appearing wall of green. Or the quiet satisfaction of knowing your route looks like just another impenetrable thicket. This constant effort to blend in, to remain unseen, fostered a deep connection with the natural environment. You learn its rhythms, its sounds, its subtle signals. The chattering of monkeys or the sudden flight of birds could warn of approaching outsiders. Long before they were visible, you become attuned to the normal background hum of the jungle, so any deviation stands out. Historians still debate the exact degree to which these trail systems were actively gardened for camouflage versus how much relied purely on the inherent density of the existing foliage. Were there dedicated teams whose sole job was jungle landscaping for concealment? Or was it an integrated part of every porter's and guide's skill set? The truth, as with many things born of necessity, likely lies somewhere in between. The psychological aspect of this is also fascinating. For those moving along these hidden routes, the jungle, while challenging, also offered a profound sense of security. It was their shield. You feel the towering trees as protectors, the dense undergrowth as a comforting blanket. The very things that made the terrain difficult, the humidity, the insects, the tangled vines, were also the things that deterred and confused those unfamiliar with its ways. There's a strange serenity in knowing that you are moving through a landscape that is actively working to hide you. It's not the exposed vulnerability of an open road. It's the sheltered secrecy of a hidden burrow. The roots themselves were often not single, fixed paths, but rather a web of shifting alternatives. If one section became compromised or was too heavily trafficked, activity would simply divert to a parallel trail, perhaps only a few hundred yards away but equally well concealed. This fluid, adaptive approach made the network incredibly resilient. It wasn't a rigid structure that could be easily broken, but more like water, finding new paths around obstacles. You might use a particular stretch for a few weeks, then let it rest and allow the vegetation to reclaim it slightly, further erasing any signs of passage, while another nearby route took up the load. This dynamic concealment was key to the long-term viability of the supply lines, allowing them to function, often for years, right under the noses of far more technologically advanced adversaries. The leafy embrace of the jungle wasn't just a backdrop. It was an active participant in this quiet, relentless logistical dance. So, you've got your heavily laden bicycle, or perhaps you're part of a line of porters carrying essential supplies, all moving under the protective cloak of the jungle canopy. But the jungle floor isn't exactly a conveniently paved sidewalk. It throws up obstacles constantly. Swift flowing streams suddenly swollen by rain, deep ravines cutting across your path. Vast stretches of ground turned into seemingly bottomless mud pits by the relentless monsoon. Just finding a way through wasn't enough. The path needed to be reliably passable, day after day, night after night. This is where you witness and perhaps participate in acts of truly resourceful, almost as unlike engineering, using little more than what the forest itself provides. The undisputed champion material for this impromptu construction. Bamboo. Forget steel girders or pre-stressed concrete. Bamboo was the miracle material. You see it everywhere. Tall, sturdy stalks growing in dense groves. It's strong, surprisingly flexible, lightweight, and grows incredibly fast. You learn that with just a sharp knife or machete, you can harvest it, split it, weave it, and lash it together to create structures of astonishing utility. Need to cross a stream? A simple bamboo bridge might suffice, perhaps just a few thick stalks laid across, secured with rat-end bindings. For a wider river, you might see teams constructing ingenious pontoon bridges, using sealed bamboo sections lashed together to create floating supports, decked with woven bamboo matting. Sometimes, more ambitious suspension bridges would appear, swaying gently over churning water, anchored to sturdy trees on either bank, their cables made from twisted bamboo fibers or forest vines. You can almost feel the slight bounce underfoot as you cross. The creak of the bamboo poles, a strangely reassuring sound in the quiet jungle. And the mud. The mud. During the rainy season, sections of the trail could become viscous nightmares, capable of swallowing boots, bicycle wheels, and possibly small logistics officers whole. Just kidding. Mostly. Keeping these sections passable required constant, back-breaking effort. You see people laying down corduroy roads not with logs, necessarily, but often with lengths of bamboo laid side by side across the muddy stretch, creating a semi-stable surface. It wasn't comfortable to walk on, and certainly bumpy for the poor bicycles. But it prevented you from sinking up to your knees. Imagine the repetitive thud and scrape of laying down these bamboo sections, the feel of the sticky, sucking mud trying to reclaim the path even as you build it. Simple drainage ditches might be dug alongside the trail, using nothing more than sharpened bamboo shovels or cupped hands, trying to channel the worst of the water away. It was a constant battle against the elements, a Sisyphean task where yesterday's passable route could be today's impassable bog. This wasn't engineering learned in a university lecture hall. This was practical physics and material science absorbed through generations of living in this environment, amplified by urgent necessity. You learned which type of bamboo was strongest, how to angle cuts for maximum stability, the most effective ways to lash joints using flexible vines or rattan strips. Mainstream historical fact: the ability to rapidly construct and repair these simple bridges and road surfaces was absolutely critical for maintaining the consistent flow of supplies, especially during the monsoon seasons when larger rivers became impassable and low-lying areas flooded. Without this constant, localized engineering effort, the entire network would have fragmented and ground to halt for months at a time. Think of it as guerrilla civil engineering. There's a certain elegance to the simplicity. No blueprints, no heavy machinery, just human ingenuity and readily available natural materials. Quirky tidbits abound regarding the speed and stealth of these constructions. Stories are told of entire bridges being assembled overnight by dedicated teams working in near silence, using pre-cut bamboo pieces prepared elsewhere, ready for transit by the time the first hint of dawn filtered through the canopy. Maybe there was a superstition attached to certain crossings, perhaps a belief that you had to cross a particularly rickety-looking bridge without speaking a word, not just for operational security, but out of respect for the precarious balance achieved by its builders, lest your voice vibrations disturb its delicate equilibrium. A sort of don't tempt fate applied to bamboo architecture. Historians still debate the specific techniques used for anchoring some of the more substantial bamboo structures, especially those spanning wider gaps or faster currents. Without access to modern tools like pile drivers or concrete foundations, how exactly did they secure those anchor points deep enough and strong enough using only manual labor and natural materials to withstand monsoon flood waters? The evidence often lies in oral histories or the decaying remnants found years later, leaving room for interpretation and quiet academic speculation on the finer points of this farce-born engineering. You might find yourself part of a repair crew, replacing a cracked bamboo pole on a bridge, or reinforcing a section of muddy track that's starting to give way under the constant passage of feet and wheels. It's not glamorous work. You're probably covered in mud, sweating in the humid air, swatting away insects. But there's a quiet satisfaction in it. You're not just fixing a path, you're maintaining a lifeline. Each lash joint, each well-placed bamboo section, is a small victory against the relentless challenges of the terrain and the climate. These humble, hand-built structures, the creaking bridges, the muddy corduroy roads weren't just ways to get from A to B. They were tangible symbols of resourcefulness, resilience, and the unwavering determination to keep moving forward, one carefully placed bamboo pole at a time. The land roots, with their ingenious camouflage and bamboo engineering, were vital. But sometimes the easiest way through the dense, trackless terrain wasn't over it, but along its watery veins. You find yourself shifting perspective, leaving the muddy trails for the surprisingly cool, dark surface of a river or stream, often under the cloak of night. Imagine drifting silently, the only sound the gentle dip and swirl of a paddle, the occasional gurgle of water against the hull, and the constant, surprisingly loud chorus of nocturnal insects and frogs from the riverbanks. The vessels you're using are as humble and resourceful as everything else in this network. Forget powerful motorboats leaving obvious wakes. Think small, shallow draft wooden sampans, perhaps paddled by a single person. Gliding ghost-like close to the bank, or even simpler rafts, skillfully constructed from lashed bundles of that ever-useful bamboo. Buoyant enough to carry supplies wrapped carefully in waterproof materials. Guided downstream by someone waiting alongside in shallower sections, or pulling carefully through deeper pools. These aren't designed for speed or comfort. They are designed for stealth and the ability to navigate shallow, unpredictable waterways that larger boats couldn't even dream of entering. Your luxury cruise liner, this is not. Think more along the lines of a floating log with ambition. You become part of this silent, aquatic ballet. Movement is often timed for moonless nights or periods when cloud cover obscures the stars, maximizing concealment. The dense foliage overhanging the riverbanks becomes your ally once again, forming natural tunnels of darkness. You learn to hug the shadows, avoiding the open stretches where moonlight might catch the water's surface. Paddling techniques are refined for silence, a careful dip, a smooth pull, lifting the paddle without a splash or drip. It's an exercise in controlled, minimal movement where every ripple feels potentially betraying. You feel the tension in your shoulders, not from exertion this time, but from the intense focus required to move without sound. This reliance on waterways is a well-established historical fact, particularly in regions like the Mekong Delta or areas crisscrossed by numerous rivers and canals. These natural arteries often provided more direct routes than struggling through dense jungle or mountainous terrain, especially for bulkier or heavier supplies that were difficult to transport over land. Even with the reinforced bicycles we talked about earlier, water transport, when feasible and concealed, could sometimes move larger quantities with less human effort than portering. Of course, less effort is relative when you're pulling a heavy bamboo raft against a subtle current for hours in the dark. Probably still burns more calories than scrolling through social media. Navigating these waterways, especially at night, required incredible skill and local knowledge. You're not using GPS or nautical charts. Your guides are the shapes of the trees silhouetted against the slightly less dark sky, the feel of the current under the hull, the specific sounds of rapids or eddies ahead, the scent of particular flowering vines that only grow near certain bends. It's a sensory navigation that feels almost primal. Perhaps there's a quirky local superstition associated with river travel. Maybe you never point directly at the far bank when discussing your destination, as it might alert the river spirits who prefer their secrets kept. Or perhaps certain types of knots used to lash the bamboo rafts together were considered luckier than others, imbued with a charm to prevent leaks or snagging on hidden obstacles. A sort of nautical feng shui, applied with bamboo and hope. There were constant challenges, of course. Hidden sandbars, submerged logs, unexpected rapids, sudden downpours that could turn a gentle stream into a raging torrent, and always the potential for detection. A stray light from the bank, the sound of a paddle accidentally striking the side of the boat, any small mistake could draw unwanted attention. The porters on land had the jungle, here, Your concealment is the darkness, the overhanging leaves, and your own quiet discipline. You might spend hours crouched on a damp raft, barely moving, listening intently to the sounds of the night, every nerve ending attuned to the environment. Talk about needing a good chiropractor afterwards. Historians still engage in quiet debate regarding the precise balance and interplay between land and water routes in different phases and regions of the conflict. Was the river network primarily used for specific types of cargo, like rice, while ammunition favored the more easily dispersed land trails? Or did the reliance shift dramatically based on seasonal changes, like the monsoon rains making land routes impassable but swelling rivers enough for boat traffic? Documenting the exact volume and nature of goods moved through these clandestine aquatic channels is inherently difficult, relying often on fragmented accounts and localized reports. Imagine the relief of reaching a prearranged landing spot, perhaps a small, hidden inlet, or a section of bank obscured by particularly thick bamboo groves. Remember the bamboo. It's everywhere. Supplies are quickly and quietly unloaded, perhaps transferred to waiting porters or bicycles, ready to continue their journey overland. The boat or raft might be sunk intentionally in shallow water to be recovered later, or quickly disassembled, its components hidden separately amongst the riverside vegetation. Nothing is left to chance. The evidence of passage must vanish with the morning mist. These silent river journeys, carried out on humble vessels by skilled and cautious individuals, formed another vital layer of the supply network. They were the quiet capillaries complementing the jungle arteries, using the landscape's natural features in a different but equally ingenious way. It's a testament to the adaptability of the system, the willingness to use every possible means, foot, bicycle, both leveraging every advantage the terrain and the darkness could offer, all flowing towards a single, unwavering purpose. The gentle lapping of water against a bamboo raft might seem peaceful, almost soporific, but it carried the pulse of persistence. After days, perhaps weeks, spent pushing a laden bicycle through mud, navigating dense jungle trails, or silently paddling down dark rivers, the need for rest, resupply, and refuge becomes paramount. But where do you go when the surface world is potentially hostile, and even the thickest jungle canopy might not feel secure enough? You go down. Imagine descending from the humid, green world above into the cool, damp, and surprisingly calm embrace of the earth itself. We're talking about the complex network of tunnels that became synonymous with resilience and ingenuity. You might approach what looks like an ordinary patch of jungle floor, perhaps slightly obscured by a bush or a pile of leaves. A specific sequence of knocks or a quiet password might be exchanged with an unseen sentry. Then, a section of the ground, cleverly disguised as a termite mound, a tangled root ball, or just unremarkable earth, swings open or lifts away, revealing a narrow, dark opening. You squeeze through, pulling the concealed entrance shut behind you, and suddenly you're in a different world. The air is cooler, heavier, smelling of clay, dampness, and perhaps faintly of cooking fires from deeper within. The oppressive noise of the jungle is replaced by a muffled silence, broken only by the drip of condensation or the low murmur of voices from further down the passage. It feels like stepping into a hidden sanctuary, a secret burrow far from prying eyes. These weren't just simple holes in the ground. Over time, particularly in certain strategic areas, these tunnel systems evolved into incredibly complex underground communities. You might find yourself in a narrow passage just wide enough for one person, shoring up the walls with bamboo or woven mats. But follow it further, and it can open into larger chambers serving specific purposes. There might be sleeping areas with simple bamboo platforms, command posts where leaders could confer over maps lit by flickering oil lamps, storage caches filled with rice, ammunition, or medical supplies, workshops for repairing equipment. Kitchens with cleverly designed ventilation shafts to disperse smoke far away from the entrance, and even makeshift hospitals where the wounded could be treated in relative safety. Think of it as an underground village built with shovels, baskets, and sheer determination. It's like the world's most elaborate and arguably most necessary ant farm. The construction and maintenance of these tunnels were monumental undertakings, representing a significant historical fact about the conflict's logistics and the sheer human labor involved. Entire sections were dug by hand, often using simple tools like hoes and baskets to remove the soil, which then had to be meticulously dispersed far away to avoid creating suspicious mounds. Near the entrances, the engineering had to be precise enough to prevent cave-ins, especially during the heavy rains, and to provide basic ventilation to sustain life underground. The scale varied enormously, from small, temporary caches to vast networks reportedly stretching for hundreds of kilometers, connecting villages and strategic areas. You definitely want to avoid getting lost down there. Asking for directions might be a bit awkward. Living and working underground for extended periods presented unique challenges and led to some quirky adaptations and beliefs. The constant dampness meant that preserving supplies like paper documents or medicines required careful wrapping and storage. The lack of sunlight could be disorienting, and maintaining a sense of day and night often relied on strict routines. Perhaps there was a superstition about never whistling inside the tunnels, not just for silence, but because it was believed to mimic the sound of incoming artillery, inviting bad luck. Or maybe specific tunnels were rumored to be haunted by spirits of those who perished during their construction, requiring small offerings or quiet prayers for passage. Little psychological comforts and coping mechanisms would have been vital in such confined, often stressful conditions. Imagine the relief of finding a slightly wider chamber where you could actually stand up straight. After hours of stooping through low passages, luxury. Historians still debate the true extent and interconnectivity of the largest tunnel systems. While extensive networks like those in Sikai near Saigon are well documented, assessing the full scope across other regions often relies on integrating fragmented wartime reports, post-war surveys, and oral histories. Were some systems truly linked over vast distances, creating continuous underground highways? Or were they more often localized complexes serving specific tactical or logistical functions? The sheer effort involved in digging and maintaining such extensive networks raises questions about the labor organization and resource allocation required. For those using the supply routes, these tunnels offered more than just concealment. They were vital rest stops, secure storage depots, and places to regroup and receive orders. Imagine emerging from a long, exhausting trek through the jungle, covered in mud and insect bites, and descending into the relative cool and safety of a tunnel complex. You might receive a warm meal, have a chance to clean your equipment, get a few hours of precious sleep on a dry bamboo mat, or even catch up on news from other parts of the network. It provided a crucial psychological break, a temporary respite from the constant vigilance required above ground. You feel the oppressive weight of the jungle lift slightly as you enter the earth's embrace, even if it's cramped and dark. These underground spaces were a testament to the incredible adaptability and endurance of the people involved. They turned the very earth into an ally, creating hidden arteries beneath the visible ones, adding another layer of complexity and resilience to the already ingenious supply network. They were dark, damp, and often uncomfortable, but these subterranean refuges played a surprisingly vital role in maintaining the flow of supplies and sustaining the morale of those who traveled the hidden paths. A hidden world patiently dug, offering surprisingly calm refuge beneath the storm. You've rested, perhaps, in the cool, damp quiet of an underground refuge. Or maybe you've just completed a long stretch pushing that ridiculously overburdened bicycle. The supplies are moving, the routes are maintained. But how does everyone know where to go? What's needed? Or what dangers lie ahead? A supply network, no matter how ingenious, is useless without coordination. Imagine trying to run a global shipping company today using only vague instructions passed along. By word of mouth, chaos would ensue, probably involving a lot of lost packages and bewildered delivery drivers. Now, strip away the satellites, the radio waves, the internet, and rely almost entirely on methods that are slow, vulnerable, but above all, discreet. This is the challenge of communication along these hidden paths. Think of the messages themselves not as urgent telegrams or crisp military orders, but more like butterflies flitting through the jungle. They are small, often camouflaged, easily missed by the unobservant eye, yet capable of carrying vital information across surprising distances. The primary method, of course, is the human courier. You might be the person chosen for your reliability, your knowledge of a particular section of the trail, and your ability to blend in. You're entrusted with a message, perhaps a tightly folded note, concealed in the lining of your conical hat, tucked into a hollowed-out bamboo tube carrying water, or even memorized, a heavy weight carried only in your mind. Your journey is fraught with the same dangers as any supply porter, but with the added burden of the information you carry. Getting caught doesn't just mean losing supplies. It means potentially compromising plans, routes, or identities. Talk about pressure makes forgetting your grocery list seem pretty trivial. The messages themselves often employ clever, low-tech forms of security. Simple codes might be used, substituting words or using prearranged numerical systems known only to the sender and the intended recipient. Sometimes, messages were written using invisible ink, concocted from things like lemon juice or rice water, only becoming visible when gently heated over a lamp, assuming you had a lamp and weren't worried about the light attracting attention. It's like something out of a childhood spy kit, but with life or death consequences. You could be carrying what looks like a blank piece of paper, feeling slightly foolish, yet knowing it holds critical intelligence. Imagine the quiet satisfaction, or perhaps the intense anxiety, of carefully warming the paper later, watching the faint brown letters slowly appear, revealing instructions or warnings. The need for effective communication in decentralized, guerrilla-style operations is a fundamental historical fact. Coordinating attacks, warning of enemy movements, requesting specific supplies, more bandages needed at way station 7, less fermented fish paste, please, and maintaining morale all depended on information getting through reliably, even if slowly. Without this constant, albeit hushed, flow of information. The disparate parts of the network, the porters, the guides, the tunnel dwellers, the village liaisons could not function as a cohesive whole. The entire system relied on knowing enough, just in time. Beyond written notes, a whole vocabulary of subtle signals could be employed. Building on those village whispers we discussed earlier, remember the possibility of strategically placed flower pots or specific ways of hanging laundry. These could be part of it. A certain pattern of scratches left on a tree trunk, a uniquely arranged pile of stones beside the path, even the type of knot used to tie up a bundle of firewood left at a junction. All could convey prearranged meanings to those who knew how to read the signs. It required incredible discipline and consistency. Imagine the potential for humorous misunderstandings. If someone accidentally rearranged the danger ahead pile of stones because they thought it looked untidy. Oops. One particularly quirky and poetic method sometimes mentioned involves embedding messages within folk songs or poems. A courier might pass through a village humming a tune, seemingly innocuously, with specific changes in the lyrics or the emphasis on certain words could convey information to a listener attuned to the code. It's a beautiful, almost romantic notion, vital intelligence carried on the melody of a traditional song, slipping past unsuspecting ears. Whether this was widespread practice or more of a localized, perhaps even apocryphal technique is something historians might gently debate. Trying to verify the operational use of coded poetry in jungle warfare presents certain, shall we say, methodological challenges. Did Sergeant Men really signal the need for more ammo by subtly altering the third verse? About the heartbroken buffalo? We may never know for sure. The couriers themselves developed an almost instinctive caution. You learn to travel light and fast, often alone. You rely on your knowledge of the terrain and your ability to melt into the landscape. At the first sign of trouble, you develop routines for handovers, perhaps leaving a message in a designated dead drop, like a hollow log or a loose stone in an old wall, to be picked up later by the next link in the chain. Minimizing direct contact. Trust is paramount. You trust the person who gave you the message. You trust the next person to pick it up. And you trust the information itself. The entire communication system was characterized by its patience and its acceptance of slowness. Information traveled at the speed of a human walking or, at best, bicycling through difficult terrain. Urgent news might still take days to traverse the network. This forced a different kind of strategic thinking, one based on anticipation and resilience rather than instant reaction. You couldn't just radio for backup. You had to plan for contingencies, knowing that help or instructions might be a long time coming. So, as you settle deeper into your own quiet space, picture these messengers, the silent walkers, the singers of coded songs, the carriers of hidden notes. They were the synapses of the supply network, the quiet connectors ensuring that this vast, dispersed organism could think, react, and adapt. Like butterflies navigating the complex ecosystem of the jungle, their journeys were often unseen, their cargo precious and fragile, yet utterly essential to the survival and eventual success of the entire endeavor. The messages they carried weren't loud, but they resonated deeply through the hidden pathways. Amidst the clever camouflage, the ingenious engineering of bamboo bridges, the silent river journeys, and the vital flow of messages, let's not forget the absolute bedrock of this entire logistical marvel: pure, unadulterated human endurance. Forget the reinforced bicycles or the makeshift rafts for a moment and picture the steady, rhythmic heart of the supply lines the porter. You are now shouldering a load, perhaps balanced on a traditional carrying pole across your shoulders, or strapped tightly to your back, joining along. Quiet line snaking its way along a narrow jungle path. The loads themselves are deceptively heavy. Sacks of rice, the absolute staple fuel for everyone, weigh relentlessly on your muscles. Bundles of ammunition, compact but dense. Disassemble parts of larger equipment, awkward and cumbersome. Medical supplies, lighter perhaps, but requiring careful handling. Whatever the cargo, you feel its persistent weight with every step. Your shoulders ache, your leg muscles burn. Your bare feet or simple sandals slap softly against the damp earth, or slip slightly on loose stones. It's not a sprint. It's an ultramarathon with no cheering crowds. No energy gels unless you count a handful of sticky rice. And significantly more challenging terrain. You probably wouldn't last an hour complaining about your backpack straps digging in. The pace is steady, deliberate, almost meditative. You fall into a rhythm dictated by the person in front of you, the terrain underfoot, and the need to conserve energy for the long haul. It's not rushed, but it's relentless. Hour after hour, day after day, you walk through the suffocating humidity of midday, through sudden downpours that soak you to the skin and turn the path into a slippery mess. Sometimes through the cool darkness of night, guided only by the faint outline of the path and the person ahead. The only sounds might be the rhythmic shuffling of feet, the creak of carrying poles, the occasional muffled cough, and the omnipresent sounds of the jungle. Silence is often a necessity, a discipline maintained to avoid detection. Forget podcasts or chatting with your walking buddy. This is silent, focused effort. The sheer scale of porterage involved is a crucial historical fact. While bicycles handled significant loads on certain stretches, vast portions of the routes, especially in mountainous terrain or heavily obstructed areas, relied almost entirely on human porters. Tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands, of people, men and women, young and old, were mobilized for this task at various times. They formed a continuous human conveyor belt, moving supplies incrementally along the network, often in stages, with loads being passed from one group to another at designated points. This wasn't the work of a specialized military unit. It often involved ordinary villagers, farmers, and laborers dedicating immense time and effort, driven by a collective purpose. You learn the subtle techniques of carrying heavy loads efficiently, how to balance the weight perfectly on the carrying pole, often a simple, sturdy length of bamboo, naturally, using a slight rocking motion to ease the strain. How to adjust your stride on inclines versus declines. How to use a walking stick not just for balance, but to probe the ground ahead for unseen obstacles or slippery patches. You become intimately familiar with your own physical limits and learn how to push just beyond them. Day after day, there might be quirky superstitions among the porters, perhaps a belief that humming a certain tune helps lighten the load, or that stepping on a particular type of vine brings bad luck for the journey. Maybe certain patterns woven into the carrying straps were thought to offer strength or protection. These small beliefs can offer psychological comfort during the grueling, repetitive work. You probably develop a few odd rituals yourself. If your main companions were a 50-pound sack of rice and aching muscles, historians still analyze the logistical data, trying to quantify the incredible tonnage moved by human power alone along these routes. Calculating precise figures is challenging due to the clandestine nature of the operations and the fragmented record keeping. But estimates consistently point to millions of tons of supplies being transported over the years, primarily through the combination of porterage and modified bicycles. The debate often centers on the relative efficiency and carrying capacity compared to more mechanized transport, highlighting the extraordinary human cost in terms of sheer physical exertion required to achieve these results. Could one truly equate the carrying capacity of 50 porters to one small truck? Perhaps, but the porters could go where no truck could ever dream of reaching. The social aspect is also profound. You are part of a collective effort, moving together, sharing the burden. There's a quiet camaraderie born of shared hardship. You might help someone adjust their load, share a precious sip of water, or offer a wordless gesture of encouragement. Breaks are short, often just long enough to catch your breath, adjust your pack, and maybe chew on a piece of dried fruit or sugar cane if you're lucky. You see the determination in the faces around you, the quiet resilience that keeps everyone moving forward step after weary step. This wasn't glorious, dramatic work. It was monotonous, physically demanding, and often carried out in incredibly difficult conditions. Yet, it was the absolute foundation upon which the entire supply strategy rested. Without the steady, unwavering pace of the porters, the bicycles would have had nothing to carry, the forward units nothing to eat, the guns nothing to fire. You, the humble porter, with your aching shoulders and mud-caked feet, represent the quiet, rhythmic, and utterly vital heartbeat of the entire network. Each step taken, each load delivered, was a small, crucial victory in a long, arduous campaign fought not just with weapons, but with unparalleled human endurance and unwavering resolve. You're on the trail, and disaster strikes not an ambush, not yet, but something far more mundane yet equally crippling. A breakdown. Perhaps it's one of those heavily laden bicycles. Remember them. A tire, stressed beyond its original design limits, finally gives out with a sighing hiss. Or maybe the frame, already reinforced with bamboo and wire, cracks under the immense weight on a particularly rough patch of trail. It could be a crucial strap on a porter's pack that snaps, or a vital component of a shared cooking pot that breaks. In a modern, well-supplied army, you just requisition a new part or a whole new bike. But here, in the deep jungle, miles from any workshop, layers from any spare parts catalog, you can't just order a replacement on Amazon Prime next day delivery to the third big tree. Past the grumpy-looking rock was probably not an option. This is where you witness and actively participate in a level of resourceful repair that borders on the magical. Necessity isn't just the mother of invention here. It's the desperate, ingenious MacGyver of the wilderness. You see someone contemplating that flat bicycle tire. No spare tube, no patch kit. What do? They might start stuffing the tire casing with whatever they can find: tightly packed leaves, dried grasses, woven strips of bamboo, even old rags if available. The goal isn't a perfect, comfortable ride. It's just to make the wheel round enough and firm enough to keep moving, even if it's a bumpy, lurching journey. You can almost hear the bicycle groaning in protest. I was designed for leisurely rides to the Boulanggerie, not for this. If a metal frame snaps, you don't just abandon the bicycle and its precious cargo. You'll see people painstakingly splinting the brake. Strong links of bamboo. Remember our versatile friend. are lashed tightly on either side of the fracture using wire salvaged from who knows where, or tough forest vines that, when dried, shrink and tighten their grip. It's not pretty. It's probably not structurally sound by any engineering standard. But if it holds for another 10, 20, or 50 kilometers, it's a triumph. You might even see them heating a piece of scrap metal over a small, carefully controlled fire and attempting to hammer it into a makeshift patch, a kind of primitive field forge. This culture of making do and repair was absolutely integral to the functioning of the supply lines. A mainstream historical observation often highlighted when discussing their resilience. Equipment was scarce and precious. Every item, from a cooking pot to a rifle, was kept in service for as long as humanly possible through constant maintenance and creative repairs. The ability to fix things with found objects wasn't just a useful skill. It was a core operational principle. Losing a bicycle wasn't just losing a piece of equipment. It was losing a significant portion of carrying capacity for that section of the trail until it could be repaired or, in dire circumstances, replaced, which itself was a major undertaking. You might be tasked with mending a torn sack of rice. No needle and thread. Perhaps you use a sharpened bamboo sliver to punch holes and then sew the tear with strong, thin strips of rattan or even certain types of flexible tree bark. A broken carrying pole, you'd quickly find a suitable sapling, trim it to size with your machete, and have it back in service in minutes. It's a constant process of improvisation, of seeing potential in the seemingly useless. A broken clay pot might be carefully pieced back together and bound with wire or vine, perhaps lined with a layer of clay to seal the cracks, good enough to boil water again. That slightly chipped cup still holds water, still useful. There's a quirky, almost philosophical aspect to this. You develop an intimate understanding of the objects you rely on. You know their weaknesses, their points of failure, and you learn how to coax just a little more life out of them. Superstitions might even attach to certain repairs. Perhaps a bicycle repaired with a splint from a lightning-struck bamboo tree was considered particularly lucky, imbued with the resilience to withstand further shocks. Or maybe a patch made from a piece of a downed enemy aircraft if such a thing was ever found. And accessible was thought to carry a certain defiant power. These small beliefs could add a layer of psychological reinforcement to the practical act of repair. This bike isn't just patched. You might think, it's blessed. Historians still marvel at the sheer ingenuity displayed in these field repairs, often piecing together the methods from scant physical evidence or oral testimonies. The exact composition of jungle glue used to seal leaks, or the precise techniques for retempering a broken metal tool with primitive equipment, are subjects of fascinated, if sometimes speculative, study. Did they truly manage to keep the captured French radio working for 6 more months, using nothing but bamboo antenna extensions and prayers? Perhaps the prayers helped. This constant cycle of breakdown and repair imbued the entire network with a certain organic quality. It wasn't a static system of pristine equipment. It was a living, breathing entity, constantly being patched, mended, and jury-rigged to keep it functioning. You learn not to despair when something breaks, but to immediately start thinking about how it can be fixed with what's at hand. The jungle itself becomes your hardware store. A particular type of strong leaf can become a temporary patch. A sticky tree sap might serve as an emergency adhesive. The resourcefulness is astonishing. So, as you lean back and your eyelids grow heavy, picture these moments of quiet, intense focus, the careful lashing of a bamboo splint, the painstaking stuffing of a flat tire with grass, the gentle coaxing of a broken tool back to life. It's in these small acts of creative repair, far from any battlefield, that you see the true spirit of perseverance. It wasn't just about moving supplies. It was about keeping the means of moving those supplies operational against all odds, with a little bit of wire, a lot of bamboo, and an almost magical resourcefulness. Let's talk about fuel. Not gasoline for engines, not coal for furnaces, but the fundamental fuel for the human engine powering this entire vast, intricate network, food. Specifically, let's talk about rice. You find yourself thinking about rice, perhaps more than you ever thought possible. Not fancy pilafs or elaborate risottos, just simple, life-sustaining rice, often supplemented with whatever else the jungle or sympathetic villages could provide. Managing, transporting, and preparing this food under such challenging conditions was a logistical feat in itself, as crucial as moving ammunition or medicine. Imagine you're at a hidden way station, perhaps one of those underground refuges or a well-camouflaged jungle clearing. The main event of the day, aside from avoiding detection and moving supplies, is the distribution and preparation of rations. You see sacks of rice, carefully protected from moisture and pests, being opened. The quantity is meticulously measured out enough to provide energy for the grueling journey ahead, but never enough to be wasteful. Every grain counts. You might receive your portion in a simple bowl, or perhaps wrapped in a large leaf. It's likely to be steamed or boiled rice, maybe with a pinch of salt if you're lucky, perhaps occasionally supplemented with some foraged vegetables, a small piece of dried fish, or whatever the local ecosystem or supporters could offer. Think less balanced meal and more basic calories to keep walking. Your fancy paleo, keto, vegan diet plan probably wouldn't survive long here. Transporting this vital commodity was a primary function of the porters and the reinforced bicycles. Rice is heavy, bulky, and susceptible to spoilage if it gets wet. Protecting it was paramount. You see it packed in tightly woven sacks, often double-bagged, perhaps wrapped in layers of waterproof leaves or salvage sheeting. On the trail, you'd be constantly vigilant, ensuring the sacks didn't tear on thorns or get soaked during river crossings. Losing a sack of rice wasn't just an inconvenience. It represented lost energy, lost potential for the entire network. Mainstream historical accounts consistently emphasize the centrality of rice cultivation and distribution in sustaining the Vietnamese resistance efforts over decades. Ensuring food security, even at a basic level, was inseparable from the military and logistical strategy. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. Cooking presented its own challenges. Open fires create smoke and light, both dangerous invitations to unwanted attention. So, cooking had to be done discreetly. You might use small, smokeless home-cam kitchens, ingeniously designed with long, baffled underground flues that disperse smoke over a wide area, making it almost invisible from above or afar. Or cooking might be done quickly, during brief halts, using minimal firewood, the flames carefully shielded. Sometimes, food might be cooked centrally at more secure locations and distributed cold to those on the move. Simple, cold rice balls becoming a staple energy source, easily carried and consumed without stopping. Imagine the simple, profound comfort of a ball of slightly sticky rice cupped in your hand. After hours of exhausting travel, it's not hot cuisine, but it's survival. Water, too, was a constant concern. Finding clean drinking water, especially during the dry season, could be difficult. You learn to identify reliable springs, collect rainwater, or sometimes boil water from streams. Again, using discreet methods. Carrying water was essential, often done in bamboo tubes sealed with leaves or cloth, or in salvage canteens. Dehydration was a constant enemy, just as debilitating as hunger. Maybe there was a quirky superstition about always leaving a small offering of rice or water for the spirits of the place where you camped, ensuring their goodwill and continued sustenance. Or perhaps certain patterns etched onto bamboo water containers were believed to keep the water pure. Small rituals in the face of constant need. Historians sometimes debate the precise nutritional impact of these limited diets on the long-term health and effectiveness of the porters and soldiers. While rice provided essential carbohydrates for energy, concerns about vitamin deficiencies and the overall caloric intake required for such strenuous labor persist. How did they manage to sustain such incredible physical output on seemingly meager rations? 4 years on end? The answer likely lies in a combination of extreme adaptation. Supplementation with forage foods, knowledge of edible plants was crucial, and the sheer force of will driven by their objective. Studies on the metabolic efficiency required would probably make modern sports nutritionists scratch their heads. You witness the careful management of these precious food resources. Nothing is wasted. Leftover rice might be dried and saved for later. Cooking water might be reused. Every edible part of a forage plant would be utilized. This wasn't just about scarcity. It was a deeply ingrained principle of respect for the resources that sustain them. You feel a sense of shared responsibility, ensuring that the person walking behind you will also have enough to eat tomorrow. So, as you drift deeper into relaxation, think about that simple bowl of rice. It represents so much more than just food. It's the product of countless farmers working their paddies, often under difficult conditions. It's the heavy burden carried mile after weary mile by the porters. It's the carefully managed fuel that powered the legs pushing the bicycles, the arms paddling the sampans, the hands digging the tunnels. It's the quiet, unassuming, starchy foundation of resilience. Rice and resolve, the surprisingly simple, yet profoundly powerful combination that kept the ingenious supply routes and the hopes they carried alive. The relentless physical exertion, the difficult terrain, the constant exposure to the elements, and, let's be honest, the less than ideal sanitation in makeshift camps or tunnels inevitably led to injuries and illnesses. A twisted ankle on a slippery slope, a deep cut from a sharp bamboo splinter, fevers brought on by mosquito bites, infections taking hold in the humid environment. These were constant threats, potentially as dangerous as any enemy action. Getting medical supplies to where they were needed and providing care under such primitive conditions was yet another critical and incredibly challenging aspect of the supply network. Imagine you're a medic, or perhaps just someone tasked with transporting medical supplies. Your cargo is incredibly precious, often scarce, and requires careful handling. You might be carrying bandages, perhaps woven from sterilized cloth or even certain types of processed tree bark. Antiseptics, if available, would be carefully rationed, maybe supplemented by traditional herbal remedies known for their healing properties. Basic surgical instruments, painstakingly kept clean. Pain relievers, precious and few. These aren't neatly packed in sterile boxes from a modern pharmacy. They might be bundled in waterproof cloth, tucked into bamboo tubes, or carried in repurposed containers, shielded as much as possible from the damp and dirt. You feel the weight of responsibility. Knowing these small packets could mean the difference between life and death, a recovery and crippling infection for someone further down the line. Forget dropping your phone. Dropping a precious vial of antiseptic would be a true disaster. The journey itself is fraught with difficulty. You navigate the same treacherous paths, cross the same rickety bridges, endure the same hardships as the porters carrying rice or ammunition. But your cargo demands extra care. Bandages must be kept dry. Vials must not break. Delicate equipment needs protection from jarring movements. You might devise special padding using soft leaves or salvage cloth inside your pack. Every step requires concentration, not just on the path, but on protecting the healing potential you carry. It's like being a delivery driver for the most fragile, most important packages imaginable, through an obstacle course designed by nature itself. The provision of medical aid along these routes is a stark historical reality, highlighting the immense challenges faced. Field stations were often rudimentary, perhaps a section of a tunnel, a secluded cave, or a simple bamboo shelter hidden deep in the jungle. Sanitation was a constant struggle. Trained medical personnel were few and far between, often relying on assistance with basic first aid knowledge learned on the fly, combined with traditional healers possessing deep knowledge of local medicinal plants. Treatment often focused on stabilizing patients, treating infections with available means, and preventing conditions from worsening until more advanced care could potentially be reached, which might be days or weeks away, if at all. Basic hygiene, like boiling water for cleaning wounds when feasible and safe to make a fire, became a critical life-saving measure. You might witness or participate in acts of incredible tenderness and care amidst the harsh surroundings. Someone carefully cleaning a wound with boiled water and perhaps a traditional herbal poultice. Another person patiently spooning nourishing rice gruel into the mouth of someone, too weak to feed themselves. Bandages being changed with gentle hands in the dim light of an oil lamp underground. There's a quiet dedication, a focus on preserving life and alleviating suffering, even with the most limited resources. Maybe there's a quirky local belief that saying a quiet prayer while applying a bandage helps speed the healing, or that certain types of leaves placed near a patient can help ward off fever spirits. These weren't replacements for medicine, but perhaps they offered a sliver of hope and comfort in desperate situations. It's the human touch, even more than the scarce supplies, that often made the difference. Historians still work to piece together the full picture of medical care within these networks. What were the most common ailments and injuries? What traditional remedies proved most effective? How were decisions made about evacuating severely wounded individuals when evacuation itself was so perilous? Records are often sparse, relying on memoirs, oral histories, and the archaeological study of former field hospitals or cave shelters. The effectiveness of integrating traditional medicine with limited Western supplies is a particular area of ongoing, quiet scholarly interest. Did that specific tree bark poultice really have antiseptic properties comparable to iodine? Folk wisdom often contains kernels of truth. Imagine the relief of reaching a destination, perhaps a clandestine field hospital, and handing over your precious cargo of bandages or quinine. Or imagine being the recipient of that care, the gentle cleaning of a wound, the application of a soothing balm, the quiet reassurance from a caregiver. It's a moment of profound human connection, a reminder of the value placed on each individual life even amidst the larger struggle. The flow of medical supplies, trickling through the jungle paths and river routes with such determined care, was as vital as any other component of the network. It represented hope, healing, and the refusal to abandon those who fell sick or were injured along the way. It speaks volumes about the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to provide comfort and care in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The journey of a bandage, carried carefully through miles of hostile terrain, is a quiet story of compassion woven into the larger tapestry of endurance and resistance. The journey along these hidden supply routes is undeniably arduous. Days filled with relentless physical effort, the constant threat of discovery, the discomfort of the humid jungle or the cramped tunnels, the anxiety of breakdowns, and the ever-present concern for basic necessities like food and water. Yet, amidst this backdrop of hardship and relentless toil, you find surprising moments of human connection, small comforts that sustain the spirit and reinforce the shared purpose. It's not all mud and misery. Sometimes, it's also a quietly shared smile over a cup of trailside tea. Imagine you've reached a designated halt for the night, perhaps a small clearing artfully concealed from above, or a slightly wider section of a tunnel complex where a tiny, almost smokeless fire is permitted. The heavy loads are set down with sighs of relief. Shoulders are rubbed, tired feet are stretched, and then someone produces a small packet of tea leaves, carefully hoarded, or perhaps a handful of bitter but invigorating forest herbs known to make a passable brew. Hot water, boiled over the precious fire, is poured into shared bamboo cups or chipped enamel mugs. You cradle the warm cup in your hands, the steam carrying a fragrant aroma that cuts through the damp earthiness of your surroundings. It's a simple pleasure, but in this context, it feels like an incredible luxury. Forget your fancy artisanal coffee blends. This rough jungle tea, shared in camaraderie, is infinitely more satisfying. These small moments of respite are crucial. They are opportunities to rest not just the body, but the mind. You might share stories in hushed tones, news from home if a recent courier has arrived, anecdotes from the trail, perhaps even a quiet joke that lightens the mood, carefully keeping voices low. The humor, when it comes, is often a gallows humor, a way of coping with the absurdity or the difficulty of the situation. Maybe someone recounts the comical sight of a heavily laden bicycle taking a slow-motion tumble into a mud puddle. The rider was fine, just very muddy. Or the time a particularly bold monkey tried to make off with a porter's lunch. Laughter, even quiet and subdued, is a powerful medicine. The bonds forged in these shared moments of hardship and simple comfort are incredibly strong. You are relying on each other for survival, for support, for the success of your collective mission. A shared piece of fruit, an offer patch for a torn piece of clothing. Help in balancing a load. These small acts of kindness build a powerful sense of solidarity. Mainstream historical and sociological studies of groups in extreme circumstances consistently highlight the importance of such informal social support systems in maintaining morale and group cohesion. It's not just about the mission, it's about the people you're undertaking it with. You're not just cogs in a logistical machine, you're individuals sharing a profound and profoundly difficult experience. You might find someone quietly mending their sandals by the firelight, using a sharpened piece of bamboo as an awl and a strip of tough vine as thread. Another might be painstakingly cleaning their rifle, ensuring it's ready despite the damp conditions. These are quiet, focused activities, but they happen in a shared space, creating a sense of communal effort even in individual tasks. Perhaps there's a quirky, unspoken rule at these rest stops: the first person to successfully light the fire without too much smoke gets to tell the first short story. Or maybe there's a particular lucky spot to sit by the fire, one that everyone subtly vies for without ever admitting it. Little rituals of camp life that make the strange feel familiar. Historians often find it challenging to capture these ephemeral moments of daily life and human interaction from traditional historical records, which tend to focus on larger strategic movements or casualty figures. The personal diaries, letters if any could be sent or received, or later oral testimonies of those who lived through these times become invaluable sources for understanding the softer side of such arduous endeavors. How did they celebrate a small success? How did they mourn a loss within their small group? These human details paint a fuller picture than maps or supply manifests alone. The debate might be, how widespread were opportunities for such small comforts? Were some sections of the trail so perilous and demanding that even these brief moments of shared tea were an impossible luxury? The landscape itself, while often an adversary, could also offer moments of unexpected beauty and peace. A sudden shaft of sunlight breaking through the canopy to illuminate a vibrant orchid. The intricate patterns of a spider's web glistening with dew in the early morning. The distant call of an exotic bird. In the midst of the struggle, these small glimpses of natural wonder could provide a brief mental escape, a reminder of the world beyond the immediate hardship. You might pause for just a second, looking at a particularly beautiful sunset filtering through the trees, and feel a quiet sense of awe, even as your muscles ache. These trailside teas and shared smiles, these brief interludes of rest and quiet conversation, were not frivolous. They were essential threads in the fabric of resilience. They recharged weary spirits, reinforced bonds of comradeship, and reminded everyone of their shared humanity in the face of dehumanizing conditions. They were the small, warm embers that kept the inner fire of determination burning, ensuring that the porters, the guides, the messengers, and everyone else along those ingenious, arduous routes could find the strength to get up the next morning and continue their surprisingly calm, yet utterly vital campaign. The jungle isn't static. Seasons change, foliage grows or dies back, rivers rise and fall. Enemy patrols shift their focus, new technologies for detection might be deployed. Aerial reconnaissance patterns alter. The supply routes, therefore, couldn't afford to be static either. They had to be living, breathing entities, constantly adapting and evolving to survive and function effectively. You're witnessing not a fixed network etched onto a map, but a fluid system of forest corridors constantly being reassessed, rerouted, and refined. Imagine you're part of a small reconnaissance team, perhaps led by someone with generations of local knowledge pulsing through their veins. Your task isn't to move supplies, but to scout new potential pathways or assess the safety of existing ones. You move with extreme caution, observing, listening, noting changes in the landscape or signs of enemy activity. Has that stream become too wide to ford easily after recent rains? Is there evidence of patrols near the old bamboo grove crossing? Has the canopy thinned out in a particular section, reducing cover from above? Based on your quiet assessment, decisions will be made back down the line. Perhaps traffic needs to be diverted to a parallel, less exposed route for a while. Maybe a new, temporary bridge needs to be constructed further upstream. It's like being a conductor, subtly adjusting the flow of an orchestra, except the instruments are porters and bicycles, and the concert hall is 1,000 square miles of dense jungle. One wrong note could be disastrous. This constant adaptation is a key historical characteristic explaining the longevity and success of these networks against technologically superior opponents. Rigidity would have meant vulnerability. If the enemy discovered and blocked one route, activity simply shifted to another. If a section became too difficult due to natural causes, alternatives were found or engineered. The system was designed for redundancy and flexibility from the outset, leveraging the sheer vastness and complexity of the terrain. It wasn't a single highway that could be cut, but a mesh of countless capillaries, constantly finding new ways to connect. Think of it like a slime mold solving a maze, not necessarily the fastest or most direct, but incredibly resilient and adaptive. Probably less slimy, though. Mostly, you see this adaptation in the very nature of the trails themselves. Some sections might be heavily used for a period, then deliberately allowed to become overgrown and rest, blending back into the jungle while activity shifts elsewhere. This made mapping the network incredibly difficult for outsiders. By the time a section was identified, it might already be dormant, with the flow rerouted. You might be using a path 1 week that feels like a well-trodden corridor, only to return a month later and find it almost reclaimed by vines and undergrowth, while a previously faint track nearby has become the main thoroughfare. It required constant communication. Remember those butterfly messages, and impeccable coordination across different sectors. The types of supplies being moved also influenced route choices and adaptations. Transporting bulky bags of rice might favor routes with gentler gradients or access to waterways, even if slightly longer. Moving sensitive or urgently needed items like ammunition or medical supplies might prioritize speed and concealment, even if the path is more physically demanding. You might see specialized subnetworks developing, perhaps certain ultra-secret paths, used only for leadership movement or critical intelligence couriers, known only to a select few guides. The quirky logistical challenge of moving, say, a disassembled anti-aircraft gun, as was sometimes necessary, would require significant route planning and adaptation, probably involving temporary widening of paths, reinforcement of bridges, and mobilization of large teams, all done with maximum stealth. Imagine the muttered complaints, rice sacks were bad enough, now this. Historians still try to map the evolution of these routes over time, correlating shifts in pathways with major military campaigns, changes in enemy tactics like the introduction of defoliants or new sensor technologies, and seasonal variations. It's a complex puzzle, piecing together fragmented maps, reports, and oral histories to understand how this vast logistical organism reacted and morphed. Was there a central brain directing all these adaptations, or was it largely driven by localized responses and initiatives coordinated through the existing communication channels? The reality likely involves elements of both strategic direction meeting tactical improvisation. You gain a profound appreciation for the deep, almost intuitive understanding of the landscape required for this constant adaptation. It wasn't just about knowing where the paths were. It was about understanding the potential for new paths, seeing possibilities where an outsider would see only impenetrable wilderness. It required reading the subtle cues of the terrain, anticipating how weather patterns would affect different areas, and having an encyclopedic knowledge of hidden valleys, stream crossings, and mountain passes. This wasn't knowledge you could get from a book. It was learned through lived experience, passed down through generations, and honed by constant necessity. So, as the rhythm of my voice perhaps guides you further towards sleep, picture these forest corridors not as fixed lines, but as flowing currents within the sea of green. They swell and recede, shift and divert, constantly seeking the path of least resistance and maximum concealment. This dynamic, adaptive quality was the secret weapon hidden within the jungle itself. It wasn't just about the ingenuity of bicycles or tunnels. It was about the living, breathing intelligence of the network itself, constantly learning, reacting, and evolving, ensuring that the vital flow of supplies, like a persistent jungle river, would always find a way through. We've journeyed far together, haven't we? From those ancient, almost forgotten footpaths, through villages whispering secrets, alongside creaking, overburdened bicycles, and under the silent, leafy embrace of the jungle canopy. We've crossed rickety bamboo bridges in the dead of night, navigated dark rivers on humble sampans, and found surprising refuge in the cool, damp earth of hidden tunnels. We've seen messages flit like butterflies, felt the relentless rhythm of the porter space, witnessed ingenious repairs with found objects, and understood the profound importance of a simple bowl of rice and a carefully transported bandage. We've even shared a moment of quiet camaraderie over trail-side tea and marveled at the living, breathing adaptability of these evolving forest corridors. Now, as our journey through these ingenious Vietnamese supply routes nears its end for tonight, you begin to see how all these seemingly mundane, often arduous, and surprisingly calm elements coalesced into something truly remarkable. This wasn't a war won by grand, thundering charges in the traditional sense, or by overwhelming technological superiority on the part of those who built these paths. Instead, what you've been witnessing, in all its quiet, persistent detail, is the logistical underpinning of an entire struggle for national independence. The unsung blueprint, if you will, drafted not on paper in some distant headquarters, but etched into the landscape and the collective will of a people by sheer necessity and incredible resourcefulness. The true genius of these roots lay in their very boringness, their ability to blend into the everyday, their reliance on simple, readily available materials, and the immense, almost unseen labor of countless individuals. Think about it: a bicycle, a bamboo pole, a needle and thread improvised from a thorn and a vine, a handful of rice. These are not the dramatic tools of warfare we usually imagine. Yet, in this context, they became instruments of profound strategic importance. The ability to consistently move food, ammunition, medicine, and people through incredibly hostile terrain, often undetected, for years, even decades, was a feat that baffled and frustrated far more powerful adversaries. It was a quiet, relentless pressure, a constant trickle that eventually wore down stone. You wouldn't win any medals for most rice sacks sufficiently hidden under a fern, but perhaps you should have. This network demonstrated a profound understanding of the local environment, a mainstream historical consensus. The builders and users of these routes didn't fight the jungle, they partnered with it. They used its density for cover, its bamboo for construction, its rivers for transport, and its hidden places for refuge. This intimate knowledge, passed down through generations and honed by immediate need, was a more potent weapon than many contemporary technologies. It's a testament to the power of local expertise and adaptation in the face of overwhelming odds. Imagine trying to explain the subtle art of camouflaging a trail, using only 3 specific types of leaves to a foreign general relying on satellite maps. The conversation would be brief. The social organization required to create and maintain such a vast, decentralized network was equally astonishing. It relied on immense trust, shared sacrifice, and a deep, unwavering commitment to a common goal, often at great personal risk. From the village elder who knew the secret paths to the young woman carrying messages, from the farmer who contributed a portion of his meager harvest to the poor, who carried it for miles, each played a crucial, if often anonymous, role. Quirky local traditions or superstitions might have played their part in maintaining morale or enforcing discipline. Those little human touches that make a monumental effort bearable. Perhaps a shared belief that the spirits of the ancestors watched over those who toiled honestly on the paths, offering a sense of spiritual protection and purpose. Historians continue to study and debate various facets of these supply lines: the exact tonnage moved, the precise impact of certain technological countermeasures, the full extent of the tunnel systems, or the long-term sociological effects on the communities involved. But the overarching narrative is one of incredible human resilience and ingenuity in the face of adversity. It's a story where the boring details, the meticulous planning of a rice ration, the careful mending of a bicycle tire, the silent paddling of a raft become the building blocks of a national epic. It redefines what constitutes a weapon or a battlefield. Here, the battlefield was the trail itself, and the weapons were endurance, resourcefulness, and an unyielding spirit. As you feel yourself drifting off, let the image settle, not of dramatic explosions, but of a continuous, quiet flow. A line of porters moving like ants through the immense green. A bicycle wheel slowly, painstakingly turning. A needle stitching a tear. These were the rhythms of the unsung path. The steady, determined pulse that ultimately contributed to a nation's independence. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound victories are won not with a bang, but with a persistent, ingenious, and surprisingly calm whisper. The wind sighs now, a gentle exhalation through the canopy, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the distant, imagined echo of softly treading feet. The last of the porters has reached their destination for the night. The final bicycle has been carefully concealed, and the cooking fires, if any were lit, have long since faded to cool ash. A deep quiet settles over the once bustling, hidden arteries of the jungle. A quiet that speaks of tasks completed, of journeys ended. For now, the bamboo bridges, those marvels of impromptu engineering, still span the dark waters. But their timbers are perhaps a little more weathered, a little more integrated into the forest's embrace. The tunnels, those subterranean sanctuaries, lie silent and empty, their secrets held close by the cool earth. The entrance is perhaps slowly being reclaimed by the persistent green. The paths themselves, once so vital, so carefully maintained, are beginning to soften. The sharp edges of countless footsteps gradually smoothed by time and the gentle fall of leaves. You can almost feel the landscape breathing a slow, long sigh of relief. The tension of those urgent, clandestine movements slowly dissipating like morning mist. The great collective effort, the meticulous planning, the shared hardships, and the quiet acts of courage have passed into the realm of memory, into stories whispered and histories written. What remains is the enduring presence of the land itself, the ancient trees that witnessed it all, the rivers that still flow along their timeless courses, the mountains that stand as silent sentinels, the ingenuity, the resilience, the quiet determination. These qualities linger not as ghosts, but as an indelible part of the human story, a testament to what can be achieved with so little against such overwhelming odds. The surprisingly mundane has, in its own way, become monumental. And as you drift further, let the peace of these now quietened pathways envelop you. The battles, both loud and whispered, are over. Only the gentle, soothing passage of time remains, covering old trails with new growth and bringing a deep, restful calm.